This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so backtracking here a little bit. So I'll be talking to you today about promoting your Gutsy walk, and I'm going to touch on a couple of different topics. So essentially, I'm going to be addressing what the goals, strategies, and tactics are, and I've tried to provide like a fairly comprehensive overview, particularly in terms of attracting media attention. So as we all know, the goal of the Gutsy Walk is to raise funds for our research and patient programs. And essentially, we do have two main strategies trying to propel us forward to essentially achieving that goal. So our two main strategies are capturing local media attention and then also increasing participation. So in terms of local media attention, essentially that is just pitching the media, and we have a couple of different tools that you can use for that. And then in terms of increasing participation, we're aiming for attendees, volunteers, and potential sponsors. And pretty much the main tactics for that are social media and then the community calendars. So first, I'm just going to dive into local media. So why is it important? Essentially, gaining local media coverage brings about two benefits. So it'll raise awareness about our organization, particularly in terms of its mission, our purpose, the values, and the different patient programs that we support, as well as the research that we fund. And then the second area where it creates awareness is about the walk itself. So adding details about the walk and then also the impact that the event has in terms of creating awareness in the local community, but then also how that fundraising revenue is driving these different types of programs. And so the outcomes of this local media coverage are that it would gain more volunteers for the organization. It essentially would lead to an increase in donations. It helps build our community, and then it also enables more people to access our programs. So there are three main types of media that we try to address. So there's print, radio, and television. And the main way that you can get media coverage is through pitching reporters. So I'm just going to go and break down the basics for pitching. And so hopefully some of these tips that I've included in here will be helpful for you. So obviously the first step that you're going to do is search for local media outlets in your area. So whether it's print, radio, television, whichever outlets are most popular that you might see in your day-to-day lives, or maybe perhaps some of the different outlets that you have to do a little bit more digging for. So the second step is to identify the best reporter to contact. And so there's a couple of different types of reporters for each outlet. So for example, with print, there's assignment desks, there's health and lifestyle reporters and editors. For television and radio, there's assignment or news desks, news editors and schedulers, or program hosts. So the second component of pitching is to review past articles that the different reporters have written about to identify who essentially is interested in similar content. So there's a couple of different check marks that you can go through. Did they report on the Gutsy Walk in the past? Did they report on another charity event in the community? Do they have an interest in other community events? Do they write local news stories? So essentially, you're more likely to receive media coverage from reporters who have already reported on different stories of a similar context. And so that's something that you really want to make sure you're honing in on to get the best outcome possible. So there's a couple of different areas that you can go to find the reporters for each media outlet. So you can either go to the Contact Us page and search for their information listed there. So typically they'll note the name, the email, and the area of work. And then if you do have trouble trying to identify who you should be connecting with, you can always go through and search for the media outlet's general contact information, and that should be able to help you as well. So when you're pitching media, your new favorite tool will be the media advisory. So this is something that we typically use day to day if we're trying to get any media coverage, whether it's at the local level or the national level. And essentially it's standard practice across all public relations and marketing outlets if we're trying to get coverage for our events or different stories. So this document essentially should be one page. So it's kept nice and short for the reporters to quickly look at. So the document will outline the what, the why, the who, when, where, highlights, and contact information. So the what would be a very brief description about the event itself. The why would be saying why this event is important to the community, and also why is it important in general, so the impact and outcomes that it will have. Who would typically highlight any key contacts of interest that reporters might be interested in meeting. So whether it was the head of the local chapter, if there's somebody else who's acting as a representative for that local walk, maybe it's the honorary chair, or if there's another local figure who will be participating and helping with the event, those are all good people to list on the media advisory. And then the other two components directly underneath the who, the when and the where, those are pretty self-explanatory. So you want to provide the park name, the location of the park, and any key details about when and where the event's taking place. So when, obviously, you would note the registration time for your walk, and then also the start time for the actual walk itself. And for the where, you can always include key pieces of information. So perhaps if there's any special instructions that you need to provide in regards to parking, you can always include that there. In terms of highlights, you're going to kind of have to see who is attending, what the different components are for your local event, since each event varies based on the area. So for example, if there is somebody who is able to participate in an interview, you can note in the highlight section who it is and what their role is. And then in terms of contact information, you're going to provide your contact information, so your name, your phone number, your email address, and then you can also note in that area if you're a volunteer or an employee with Crohn's and Colitis Canada. And you'll find a sample of this template media advisory in the Gutsy Walk volunteer tools on our website, and it's available both in French and English. So essentially, you just have to take that template and update it with the information pertaining to your local walk. So when you're pitching the media advisory to reporters, there's a couple of key things to keep in mind. In terms of timing, you want to send it to the reporters roughly 1 week in advance. This gives them enough time to quickly look at the details for the event, and it also doesn't kind of let it sit in their inbox for a long period of time, and perhaps they might just miss it or disregard it. So you're going to want to give it an appropriate amount of time to reach out to them. You're also going to want to keep your pitch short and concise. So you don't want it to contain too much information. You want the reporter to be able to quickly skim through the pitch and see what the key points are. And you want to also include 2 calls to action. You can either include a call to action to invite the reporter to attend the walk, or you can ask the reporter to cover the story. So decide which call to action you want to include. Both are great. If we can get coverage for the event following the story, that's awesome. And then if you can actually get the reporter to attend the walk, that's great as well. So when you're pitching the media advisory, here's a couple of different hooks that you can use in your email to garner interest. So you can refer to the total amount the walk raised in the past. You could also mention attendees who are well known locally. So perhaps it's the mayor of your town that you're hosting the walk in. If there's any notable individuals, say if there's like an athlete or whatnot who's associated with the area who's attending the event, you can always note those individuals in the email pitch. You can also note again if these individuals are available for speaking opportunities. You can also include if there are any representatives from Crohn's and Colitis Canada that are available for the speaking opportunities as well. You'll provide a brief description of our organization and why the walk matters to the local community. And you can briefly note where the funds that are raised are going to. So it's really important to keep in mind that when you're writing these emails and you're pitching the content to the reporter, to really cater the email pitch to the reporter based on their interest. And you want to make sure you're describing why the event is unique and why this event should be interest to that particular reporter. So the next step is, once you've pitched the media advisory, if you do not hear back within, I would say, a day or two, you can always send a follow-up email And this follow-up email template can also be found in our Gutsy Walk volunteer tool. If you happen to be pitching by telephone rather than email, you can always look at the media advisory template and then also the follow-up email template to get an idea of some of the components that you can speak about in the telephone pitch. And just make sure that you're rehearsing the information a couple of times prior to giving the call so you can remember different key details about the walk. And you can also always, as a helpful tip, just scribble down a couple of the key points that you want to discuss just as a quick reminder that you can reference to during the call. And when you're reaching out, again, be sure to mention if you're a volunteer or a staff member with Crohn's and Colitis Canada. So another tool that we'll also be providing is the public service announcement. So we'll have a video and a radio PSA available in either late April or early May. And this can accompany your pitch to the local media outlets. And you can also use this PSA video on social media as well. So you can share it across your chapter social media accounts. I know sometimes we have Twitter accounts, we have Facebook accounts, and some of the chapters also have Instagram accounts. So you can always share the video across those areas. And the links to the PSAs, once we have the completed versions, those will also be noted in the Gutsy Walk volunteer tool. So you can simply download the videos and the radio PSA right from there. A secondary tactic that you can use to reach out to reporters is social media. Oftentimes you'll be able to easily locate them. Sometimes they'll be listed on the websites what their social media handles are. Other times you might have to do a bit of digging through the particular channel, but typically they're fairly easy to find. So that pretty much wraps up the media relations component of gaining attention for your local Gutsy Walk. And so right now I'm just going to dive into how you can how you can increase participation. Okay, so there's a couple of different outlets you can use to promote the Gutsy Walk. So you can either promote it to the community by using community event calendars and also your social media accounts. So Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, as I just mentioned. So first we'll dive into the community event calendars. So oftentimes you'll find on local websites, there's a section where you can submit event listings. So you'll see a couple of different examples here of sites that do allow you to list events. So there's the Vancouver Sun, the Coast, the Overcast, and there's also some other city-operated event calendars that will accept submissions. So you'll just have to do a bit of digging to find out which sites are most relevant to your local area and then the submission process that they require. Okay, so when you're submitting your event, you'll just have to make sure you're including the correct information, so the appropriate time, so you can include the registration time for the walk and the actual time that the walk kicks off. Obviously, you'll include the date and then the location details as well. In terms of adding in an event description, we do already have a draft template revised. And again, you'll also be able to find this in the Gutsy Walk volunteer tools. For your specific event, you can go ahead and tweak the template to make sure it's aligned with content for your particular walk. And then when you're posting these events, be sure to include the URL for your specific Gutsy Walk registration page rather than the national account. So that wraps up the community calendars. And then the next area we'll go into is social media. Okay, so we all know that social media is quite a powerful tool for building communities and then promoting events. So you can turn to your respective chapter, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts to promote participation, attract volunteers, and gain local sponsors. So one of the first steps that you can do is update the cover image on your chapter's account. So we've drafted an image for Facebook and Twitter. And again, that tool can be found under the Gutsy Walk volunteer tools. So you can simply update your chapter's account with this image. And then we also always encourage you to use those images as well, and you can apply them to your own personal account. So another great option is to make sure you're sharing some fun Gutsy Walk images with your chapter posts to really boost the engagement and provide a sneak peek into what the event's like. So we have a collection of past walk images that you can use, and those are all found in the Marcom folder in the O drive. Then you can always turn to either past posts that were created for the walk for ideas, or you can also turn to our national social media accounts. We have Pearl working on our social media accounts across the board for our national French or national English accounts, and she's working to create regular posts. So you can always turn to her for different ideas. And at the end of the presentation, I'll also provide you with her contact information. That way, if you do have any questions about social media and how you can best utilize the tool to promote your local walk, you can always reach out to her. Okay, so for the copy for social media, you always want to try to make it fun, informative, and short. So there's a couple of best practices to use when crafting copy. So you want to make sure to include an engaging call to action. So whether it's registering, join us, you want to make sure you're enticing the reader to really get engaged and take some sort of action after reading the copy. It's also really great to include an image, just as I mentioned before, to give a bit of a sneak peek about what they can expect at the walk. And it's also just a bit more engaging for the viewer, particularly on platforms like Instagram, which is so much more visually based, and also on Facebook. Be sure to include some key details about your local walk in the post, and then link to your Gutsy Walks registration URL, so the URL specific to your location. And then you can also include mentions to sponsors and special guests on Twitter. And again, if you have questions about any of these best practices, you can always turn to Pearl for advice. And one of the other really great ideas and ways to promote our events is to use hashtags in your posts. I'm sure you see them scattered all across social media. So there's a couple of best practices that you can use when you're using the different platforms. So typically for Facebook and Twitter, we recommend using about 1 to 2 hashtags. And a couple of different ideas for the hashtags that you can use are location centric. So you could use hashtag Toronto, hashtag Halifax. So depending upon where you're located, you can use the hashtags that are most popular in your area. And then we also really encourage you to use the event related hashtags. So for the walk, we always use hashtag Gutsy Walk. And we encourage you to use that when you're posting. And you can also encourage others, if they're sharing content on their own platforms during the day, to use hashtag Gutsy Walk. So this way we can kind of keep track of some of the posts that members of the public and participants are sharing, and we can share those across our national accounts. And you can also share them across your chapter accounts as well. And so you'll also see across some of our platforms that other hashtags that are commonly used include references to Crohn's and colitis IBD. So for platforms such as Instagram, you can include quite a series of different hashtags that are relevant to our organization and then also relevant to the walk and then the location that your walk is taking place at. So I've included a couple of different sample posts that you can refer to for some ideas. So you'll see on here, this is an invitation on Facebook encouraging people to register for a walk. And you'll see that we use the hashtag Gutsy Walk, and we also use a location-centric hashtag as well. And you'll see too here that we try to include some visuals to really just give a sneak peek about what the event is like, and then also to include a link to the event. Here's a couple of examples for Twitter posts. So again, using really visual images, whether it's, say, the symbol for the Gutsy Walk or a banner, or if you have some really great event day pictures that you can take. And again, you'll see that we use hashtags for Gutsy Walk, hashtags for IBD, and also a call to action and a link to the Gutsy Walk page. And then you can also, as I mentioned before, use social media to try to recruit local businesses to sponsor the event. So you can always turn to trying to locate the local chapters, what kind of best practices that they could use for reaching out to all of the local businesses. So you can typically do a good search across social media and find out what their handles are. You can also always turn to their websites. Typically, they'll have them listed either at the bottom of their web pages or at the top of their landing page. And you can also use Twitter, for example, in this particular image. You can use it to reach out and also include some of the location-centric hashtags and then also hashtags pertaining to the Gutsy Walk. And you can either use this as a general call to action, or if you have a particular business that you're looking to recruit to participate, you can always make the post catered to them as well. And I've already mentioned some of these best practices, but I'll just reiterate them again as they really pertain to Instagram. So again, you want to make sure you're sharing some really fun images about the event. You can use as many hashtags as you need. As I mentioned before, both location-centric and event-related hashtags. And then one just important thing to keep in mind is that the hyperlinks that you share within posts, they won't actually be clickable. So just be sure that whenever you're trying to drive people, say, to your Gutsy Walk registration site for your local event, you can always include the link to the page and the actual bio portion of your account. This way people can easily access a link to that page and be driving to the right area that they need to be going to register for the event or to find more information. So here's another really great example for Instagram. Again, you'll see a really great visual, a few details about the walk, so when the date is. You can also see that there's a certain number of walk sites available, and then you can also see underneath a couple of different hashtags that are used. And another great option is to create a Facebook event for your local area. So you can use your chapter account to make this. And we've also drafted another tool for this. So you can see a template available in the Gutsy Walk volunteer tools. And so on this Facebook event, you're going to share key details and then include a link to your local Gutsy Walk registration. So again, you'll share details about when it takes place, what it's for, and any additional details that you think would really make the event pop to anyone who could be interested in attending. So here's an example of the Facebook event. So you can see that it provides an area for a visual, the event name, the location, the start and end time, and then underneath you can provide a description for the event. And then there's a couple of other tips that we can give you for using your chapter social media accounts to promote the walk. You can always feel free to build upon these, and if you have any ideas that you're looking to execute, if you needed help executing them, or if you just wanted to run them by someone, again, you can always reach out to Pearl for some advice. So one option is to get creative by using your Instagram account to share some stories. So we all know Instagram is very, very popular. It's a very visual platform, and you'll often see Instagram stories being used either by individuals for their own personal reasons, or you'll also see companies or other nonprofits using them. So you can always use Instagram stories as a way to build up to the event, whether it's maybe a sneak peek of somebody who's working to create some of the collateral, or a sneak peek of some of the tools that will be appearing there. You can also use Instagram stories on the day of to show the different event imagery. You can show volunteers in action. You can show snippets from the actual walkers. So there's a couple of different ways you can use that tool. You can also use any social media platform to film yourself talking about the Gutsy Walk and why it's important. And this applies to anybody else who's acting as a volunteer or as a chapter member or as a DC. So that's another really great way to kind of drive home the impact and importance of the event. And same thing, you can also turn to your local honorary chair and see if they're interested in partaking in a video. And again, touching upon key facts about the walk, so when it's attending and why that walk really matters to him or her. And again, I just mentioned that you can always turn to social media for the event day, and we really, really encourage it just to get a bit more attention from people who are already participating in the walk, but even just to draw exposure for people who might not be participating but could potentially be interested in participating the next year. So on the event day, you can either thank local sponsors by tweeting at them, and just remember to use their Twitter account. You can also share photos throughout the event, and again, my favorite, Instagram stories, just to show the live action. And then I'm just going to quickly refer to a couple of tips for volunteer recruitment. You will be able to see it on a past webinar that our team hosted. There's more tips and tricks for volunteer engagement. And again, that's found underneath the Gutsy Walk Tools section. But I'll just kind of quickly reflect on some of the points that were mentioned in that past webinar. So again, we defer to the power of social media and how it's a great tool to be recruiting volunteers. So when you're using your social media accounts, be sure to identify and share the different types of roles that you're looking to fill. You don't necessarily have to include all of the descriptions within one post, but you could always give a segue to multiple roles that you're looking to fill, or you could also note one or two roles, send them as individual posts, but really create excitement around the roles itself and then also the event. And when you're trying to attract volunteers, really emphasize the important role that they will be playing and how they will be helping us to bring the event to life. And again, you can use event day images to show volunteers a sneak peek of what they can expect. And if you do receive any interest for individuals to join on as a volunteer, you can always encourage them to register by visiting the volunteer section of our National Gutsy Walk website. So in just a moment or two, I'll turn back to our chat to see if any questions have arisen. And just to reiterate, if you have any questions about the media materials, so media advisory, tips for pitching reporters, if you wanted me to look at the media advisory that you've crafted or a pitch, you can always send it to me by email. And then if you have questions about social media, Pearl is a great person to turn to. And you'll have this presentation again underneath the Gutsy Walk volunteer tools, so you'll be able to easily access both of our emails.